All right. Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This microphone taken. Ryan, you're not sounding yourself.
I think my microphone is broken. I went to, I'm here in the podcast studio, and it looks a lot like Joe Rogan's studio. Folks don't probably realize we record in a professional studio, and the computer's just not recognizing the microphone. And we've recorded, what is this, 155?
155. Yeah. It's funny you say this, because just as I was plugging in my fancy mic today, I was thinking, man, this thing has been a really good, reliable piece of technology. I swear to God, I thought that exact thing today.
Well, it has been. We've recorded a lot of episodes, and so when I messaged you, I said this is an error I haven't seen before, and
you've just been carting it all over South America recently, so maybe some of those airport X-rays finally took their toll on the old electronics.
It's quite possible, but I just recorded a little guest spot on a pod that comes out in a couple weeks, and
God, what's that? Go ahead, plug it.
No, I'll plug it when it comes out.
How's your other podcast doing? We don't talk about that other podcast too often. Red Line, is that what it's called?
Red Pen. We're on. It's one of these Ivy League shows that take a sabbatical for like 6 months in the summer or something. So we recorded some eps. We're taking a break, and I guess they'll email me when we're ready to go again.
How many episodes are there?
Like 13.
13. All right. Well, it's more than most podcasts make it.
Yeah.
Something tells me that ain't coming back.
We gave a shout out on the closer for folks to come check us out again.
Over here on Out of Office.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Well, then I shouldn't be. Listen. Welcome to all the 5 Red Pen listeners out there. We really welcome you here on Out of Office.
And then Red Pen is not a conservative podcaster, though. It could be. It does have a good title for that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Boy, your comments must be full. If our comments are full, yours must be really full. I was expecting, good Republican chat, and all I got was all this. What's it about? Grammar? Is that what it's about?
You've never listened to it? We've thought about having you on.
You know why? Because I remember at the beginning, just the idea that you are somehow in a position to talk about grammar is astounding to me.
I'd be good at grammar, and
no, you know what you're good at, Ryan? You are good at travel, which is why you're here on your what I like to call your home podcast, Out of Office, a travel podcast, and you're currently still traveling. I think
I'm in Medellin. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And what is this, the last stop before you're home?
Bogota is the last stop, but just did a week-long trip with friend of the pod, Chase Whiteside.
Acquaintance of the pod.
We went to
Peabody loser.
We went to Cartagena. We went to Santa Marta. Went to where Simone Bolivar passed away there in Santa Marta.
Oh, yeah. How was that?
It was pretty cool.
Are we going to do an episode? Bolivar episode?
I think we should at some point. I'm getting all the Bolivar stuff, done. So
yeah, you are. I mean, I feel like you're kind of like planning trips around it.
It's cool. And then we were in Cartagena, and we took a boat, and we went by this massive old abandoned mansion on an island called Roseo Island, outside of Cartagena.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your Insta, your personal Insta.
Yeah, we saw Pablo Escobar's old mansion that they've just let go. They've let it collapse.
That's cool. I like that they're letting it, like, nature just take it back. Did you see any hippos?
It's not that one. That's that's closer to Bogota. I would love closer to Medellin. I would love to check that out at some point.
I mean, from what I understand about the population, that soon they will take over most of the area. So
most of Colombia will
get
be
back to that island.
Yeah, most of Colombia will be Pablo's
hippo
animals.
territory.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Ryan, today, this is going to be a little bit of a kind of strange episode for us. You're the one who pitched this topic. Typically we're doing city guides. Maybe we dig deep. We have a guest on to talk to us about something they're experts in. This is the rare case where you and I read an article that is being widely discussed. It's called The Case Against Travel. And it was published in the New Yorker, and it's by a woman named Agnes Callard.
Yes, Agnes Collard, who is a PhD philosophy professor, and she took to the New Yorker, the People's Yorker is what I like to call it, and to rail against travel. She's a philosophy professor at the University of Chicago, and she does not think that travel is a positive thing for folks.
And Ryan, we had discussed potentially welcoming Professor Agnes onto the program, but honestly, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to control my hot Irish temper.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been good.
No, wouldn't have been good.
So folks might remember Agnes from a viral tweet last year where she admitted that she has, her kid is 9 years old, has thrown out the Halloween candy every year the day after Halloween. And she forgot in 2022 to do this. And the kid was really excited. And she tweeted like, whoops, mom forgot. So this is the person I think who really loves fun, and that comes through in the article.
It's gonna so you and I. This is gonna be kind of a good old fashioned episode, just you and me, Ryan, kind of riffing on a topic, and I think we both have strong feelings to certain parts of the essay, so we're gonna dig in. So here's my suggestion for those that are listening: if you haven't read the article, if you've got 10, 15 minutes, I would pause us, go read the article so that you can kind of form your opinion without us poisoning it, and then come back and get poisoned by our opinions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a link in the show notes to the article. If you're not a New Yorker subscriber, I think you get a free one. So, use
you can
that.
Also, if you've used it, you can open up an incognito window and get another article.
Yeah, but folks should, pay for media. we say after
because of everything we've been making out of office. So Ryan, I why don't we give folks some time to go off and do that? And in the meantime, I do just want to check in on your personal travels. Just one last question before we take off.
Sure.
How long in total will you have been away from Brooklyn now?
This will have been 5 weeks.
That's on the longer edge.
Yeah, no, it's on the longer edge, but I'm going back. I'm going to go see my mom out there in on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
You got to check in once every 3 years. That's your general cadence.
Going to see some Broadway shows, be a New Yorker for a little bit before I get back on the road.
Do you have a next trip?
I don't know exactly yet, but you and I have been batting around.
That's exactly what I was teasing, Ryan. So listeners will remember that Ryan and I famously last October took our first trip together. We had done day trips. We had done a ton of stuff when we both lived in New York City together. Of course, he's visited me in Boston. I visited him in New York. But we did our first trip to Richmond, Virginia together. I think we both rated it a massive success.
Yeah, it was a great success. We loved Richmond. We didn't see any ghosts. But
people who don't get that can go back and listen to the episode. And so we are currently talking about what is our next trip. And so I just want to welcome any listeners that want to pitch to us a good place to go. I think we're pretty open to country or city. Does need to be generally accessible. I really don't want to fly more than like 4 or 5 hours because I get a limited time frame getting away from the kids, And so I know top of the list for me right now under consideration is Mammoth Cave, which we considered last year, the largest cave system in the world, Ryan.
Yeah, I think Mammoth Cave would be interesting. Folks love these national park episodes, Kieran. So, I think that's high up on the list.
I'll tell you, if I have a very good friend who lives in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I would love to go there, but honestly, I got to see him when I'm there. I can't go with you.
Yeah, that would be weird.
I don't like mixing friendships.
No.
So anyone who has any ideas, welcome your input at outofofficepod@gmail.com. And Ryan, with that, God, I feel so bad having talked about being excited to travel when here we're about to analyze the case against travel.
Tell the cabin crew.
They'll bring the ship down.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Well, Ryan, I do want to ask, how did you first become aware of this article?
It was on Twitter. It was getting quite a bit of play.
I suspected. Yeah. Have you joined the threads yet?
I'm on threads at Ryan New York. Folks can find me. I'm trying to get the hang of it. But
and are you just taking the content from Twitter, putting it over on Threads?
Well, no, it's not even on desktop yet, so it's like such a pain in the butt to use it. So I have barely threaded, but I would like to thread. I'm pro thread.
God, it sounds like we're all seamstresses. This is really weird.
I don't think you've joined yet.
No, I'm not on Threads. I mean, I have a Twitter, but I have hardly ever tweeted. The only time I tweeted was when we first met. I was trying to impress you with how funny I was, and so I started to tweet. And every day I'd be like, Ryan's going to like this. And then occasionally you would retweet me, and that was huge.
Yeah, I that was back in the day when I had a lot of Twitter folks.
You had some Twitter power back then. Yeah. People may not know that. You're a real Twitter. You were a Twitter pioneer.
I was a power user back in 2009, 2010. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
it's sad to think what it's become, what you've become, really.
Well, if it wasn't for Twitter, I would have not seen this until somebody sent it to me.
Right. Well, that's a lot of people sent it to me because obviously, when you're 155 episodes into a travel podcast, when a New York article called "The Case Against Travel" gets published, a lot of people send it to you. Yeah.
So she comes out and basically says that one of the least informative things a person can say is that they love to travel. That's how she opens this piece. And, she thinks that nearly everybody loves to travel. And so this isn't a very useful comment. I don't know that everybody likes to travel. Many people.
I know several who go out of their way. They don't like the headache of it. They don't like all the planning required, all the pre-reading. They like having access to all their comforts at home, and so they kind of have to be dragged out.
Yeah, they might go on a trip every other year or something to like a greatest hits destination. But I think this idea that everybody loves to travel, it sort of kind of betrays who her friends are, folks who like to travel.
There's no question that the sort of elitist tone that threads its way through here is there's some free marketing for Threads there that threads its way through this whole article. I even find the diction and word choices she's bringing in to almost be stretching to be inaccessible to the everyman.
Yeah. She's coming in strong with some Immanuel Kant references and
Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Exactly.
There's Socrates in there.
She doesn't quote Anthony Bourdain. This is not a.
Yeah, well, I definitely felt like she was trying. First of all, I think she absolutely knew what she was doing, and
sure.
and I think she purposely was trying to bait a lot of controversy here.
Yes, she's poking at something that, to her own, she says that everybody loves to do. So she's coming out and saying that travel narrows the mind. It's a fool's paradise, and that there's a band of folks who have been against travel, going all the way back to Athens and Socrates. So she's pulling some heavy hitters out here in the beginning of the essay.
And if we could just, I don't want to be dismissive of her argument, because obviously we're both against her, but we're both against her opinion as stated in this article. But let's try to objectively say, the points that she's making, and then we can have a respectful, if colorful, a response from us.
Totally.
The first, I pulled this quote, Ryan, that I think as two travel podcasters, we got to be pretty nervous about. Let me just quickly call it out. She says, if you're going to dismiss this as contrarian posturing, which I have to say, I'd rather feel that it is contrarian posturing, try shifting the object of your thought from your own travel to that of others. At home or abroad, one tends to avoid touristy activities. Tourism is what we call traveling when other people are doing it. And although people like to talk about their travels, few of us like to listen to them. Such talk resembles academic writing and reports of dreams, forms of communication driven more by the needs of the producer than the consumer. Ryan, I felt both seen and attacked.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. Look, I am sure that there are a lot more travel books and travel logs than an audience necessarily for these things. But to say to a New Yorker or even somebody who lives in Boston, who's writing a book on the many things to do in Boston, that when you're at home, you necessarily avoid touristy activities, I think it's really interesting. She also says somewhere down in this article that she doesn't just walk around her own city.
Yes, right. Yes, absolutely. She makes that point as well. There's sort of like 3 or 4 like major themes. One of them is that, and I want to get to that one. But on this one, this idea that you don't do, you try to avoid touristy activities. I think I try to avoid cheesy activities, false activities. But sometimes, I mean, people could call the Met Museum, they could call the Louvre touristy because it's filled with tourists. But to me, I don't think either of us would say that those are places they shouldn't go just because they've been marked with this like tourist attribution.
Yeah, and certainly I play tourist in New York quite a bit. I go to a Broadway show.
Absolutely,
I'll check out a new restaurant. I'll go to a museum or an exhibition. So, I find that, I thought that was a pretty interesting thing for her to say, to kind of group all these activities that I think of as cultural or into just kind of touristy. She does go after the Louvre specifically in this piece.
She does, yes. Yeah. That's true. Even that, she went after the Louvre. I mean, that's all. It's hard to keep a straight face saying it. I also, I have to say, it does not resonate with me at all that people like to talk to about their travels, but few of us like to listen to them. I think, this is why travel sections exist. This is why travel books exist. This is why you and I have this podcast, and we've been successfully building an audience for tens and tens of episodes. And I know when
there are many travel podcasts that are massively more popular than us, believe it or not.
Well, I don't know about massively, but sure. Steve's.
But there is an audience out there of people who are consuming content around travel, who are interested in travel.
Well, and I think if you're like I am, Ryan, when I have friends who have gone out on a trip, either to a place that I've been where I want to compare notes and I want to see what they did and how their experience was different or similar to mine, and to people that go places that I someday want to go, I go in with tons of questions. I like to ask top to bottom, how did you decide to go there? How did you plan? Did you have any local expertise there? Did you have interactions with locals? Did you do the on the beaten path? Did you do off the beaten path? And I have had hours and hours of wonderful conversation hearing about people's travels.
Yeah, I enjoy hearing about people's travels. I almost wish we lived in like that Mad Men kind of world where, you remember that episode where Don and they've gone to Hawaii and everybody's gathered around to watch?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. That's the final episode, isn't it?
No, this is kind of in mid season, they're showing like the slide projector. Of the trip.
I'm confusing it. When on the last episode he goes to kind of that yoga retreat thing. Yeah.
So I think people have always loved talking about their vacations, hearing about other people's vacations, getting ideas for things to do. I mean, it's really kind of the basis of what we do here on Out of Office.
Well, and here's where I will agree with Professor Agnes Collard is slideshows and pictures of other people's travels that I'm less interested in. I enjoy the conversation more than the visual element personally.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
She also makes a point. She says, we go to experience a change, but end up inflicting change on others. And she says this as a negative. She basically tries to build the case that everybody builds up a travel narrative that like they're going to be fundamentally changed as a person through travel experience. And we've talked about there was a lot of social reaction to this on social media. And first off, a lot of people coming out and saying, I was personally changed by a travel experience that I have. I understand Agnes Collard's point where she's saying, are you going to be like fundamentally different from a 1 week vacation to another country? Maybe not. I think your horizons could be expanded, but you'll surely fall into most of your old habits. But I also think, and this is probably my biggest criticism across this whole piece, is that she makes a lot of assumptions about you. She even, in some of the quotes that I'm going to bring up later, she specifically says you, about this is how you travel. But I would personally say that I have felt changed both by individual trips and by the accumulation of trips. Like just being exposed that what I have experienced in life is not how others experience life in many different parts of the world. that has alone broadened my horizons. And I do feel that you can, when you're speaking with somebody who hates travel, who travels less, that limits their world in a way that, this is why you and I get along so well, Ryan, because we're both extremely curious.
Yeah, and I don't think that you should expect to be changed, have a huge change in your life because you've gone on a trip or two. But there are definitely moments that can be really eye-opening and expand your horizons. But I also think this idea that you're inflicting change on others, that's like the worst kind of tourism. That's like what cruise ships have done to Venice. It's not. I think I've had so many conversations in my life traveling that have been a give and take. Well, I've like learned from the person I was talking to, and hopefully they've learned something from me. And as opposed to like inflicting change on them, we're kind of learning together. I mean, it's in the nature of like human conversation, right?
Well, and also it's very inflammatory language she's choosing here. Yes. Inflicting change. Like, I mean, I have a perfect example where when I had traveled nowhere except Disney World my whole life, my junior year of high school, we had an exchange student who came to my school. Her name was Goodall. She sat right next to me during band, and we became great friends. She's a regular listener to the podcast. She's Norwegian. And the interactions we had are what broadened my mind about the world fundamentally. Now, in this framing, she would have been inflicting change on me, but that change was absolutely wonderful for me.
Right, exactly.
And thank you, Goodall. We've recently been, she's going around with her kids to Slovenia, Croatia, which are places I've been. I gave her some tips, but then she continued on to Austria, and she says Austria is a great place for family to travel. So maybe we could have her on. That'd be really fun.
That would be fun. She could inflict her change on us.
Now, another place that Agnes Collard goes after is she was talking about these things that you're told you must do in places. And she gives this example in Abu Dhabi. Ryan, you want to set that up?
Yeah, so she goes to, and I've heard, it's funny because this is so famous that I've definitely heard of it. I've never been to Abu Dhabi.
Oh, you've got to do it when you go to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I know. There's a place where they find these falcons and they help, who are sick, or they raise them and they take care of them. It's you can go visit these falcons, and it is a famous thing to do in Abu Dhabi. And she, talks about feeling compelled to do this, and she goes to this place. And when she returns, she has no interest in falconry or falcons, and a generalized dislike of encounters with non-human animals. So that just doesn't sound like it's a place that she would have enjoyed to begin with, but I was thinking about the alpaca experiences I had in Peru, and I haven't become an alpaca farmer clearly, but I enjoy alpacas in a way that I hadn't before ever thought about alpacas. And just a couple of days ago, I was looking through alpaca related content, and I think it's a high bar to say that you have to become obsessed with falcons after you go to like a single kind of falcon thing and experience something that's local to the culture that the people in Abu Dhabi have practiced and studied for generations, right?
Well, and I also think it's weird that in describing this, she says the following quote. She says, "I have no interest in falconry or falcons and a generalized dislike of encounters with non-human animals." First of all, non-human animals, again, there's that language that I think she's like really trying to be very high in the ivory tower. But secondly, I also just think if you're going in clearly saying you have no interest in falconry or falcons, I think that that's a lack of curiosity, that you shouldn't go to this hospital then if you're going to be that closed off. At least be open to the experience. How does she know she's not interested in falconry? It sounds like she hadn't tried it before. And go into the hospital and you might learn things about these falcons that are actually going to pique your interest.
Also, she seems to imply that because it's a facility where they rehabilitate these animals, it can't also be supported by tourists who go and pay to tour this place and to see the falcons, and that money helps go towards the work of the of these falconer people, right? So I just didn't understand that criticism either. It just felt kind of strange to me. It's like, well, yeah, it's a hospital. It's rehabilitating these falcons, and they're known for this, and people come and they experience something they haven't seen before, and they're supporting the mission of this hospital. It doesn't take away from the practicality of it, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. There can be a line where, you don't want to get into tourism that degrades, some work that a nonprofit is doing, but and you don't want how to say it. I do think that if it were to tip into like pity tourism or something like that could be very bad. But in this case, you're right. Like the tourist dollars. I mean, that's something she doesn't even tackle here, which is the business of tourism is an important injection of cash for lots of places that wants tourist activity. So what is wrong with a community that wants it as a business and folks who want to travel and spend their money in that way?
Yeah, exactly. I think there are a lot of examples like this, place of, especially around animals, of places that, you can go to experience local animals, to see, and it's just if she doesn't, again, but not every tourist activity is for everyone. So she might have been more comfortable in Abu Dhabi going to a history museum or something, right? She didn't have to go see the falcons. In fact, we talk about all the time, not doing the most popular thing in a city is sometimes the right move for somebody.
And moving on to what I think is like kind of her third bigger point. You got to it where she does tell this story about how when we are traveling, we kind of allow ourselves to live in a non-reality, something that's like different from our daily routine and grind. And to me, that's one of the great joys. And frankly, it gets me through the grind to have that to look forward to. And she specifically gives the example that when you're traveling in cities, you'll often allow yourself to walk huge distances in order to explore the neighborhoods. And she says that when she has lived and worked in great cities, I'll just pull the quote. In the many great cities I've actually lived and worked in, I would never consider spending whole days walking. When you travel, you suspend your usual standards for what counts as a valuable use of time. Again, this one, first of all, I don't like that she transitions to the you here, telling me how I feel about what's a valuable use of time. And I know for an absolute fact, Ryan, that you and I, living in New York, traverse this. We used to traverse the city constantly. I know you still do. I certainly walk a ton in Boston. I think it's a very valuable use of time. So don't tell me that that's markedly different when I travel.
Yeah, I love, it's like one of my favorite things about living in New York is how walkable it is. And there are many times where I will choose to walk 45 minutes from Bushwick to Williamsburg to meet someone if it's a nice day out, and to see the neighborhood and to check out new murals and just kind of like enjoy the day. I probably walk more in cities that I'm exploring for the first time, but I just don't, it's just hard to make that a negative.
Yeah, I don't know. She sums this up by saying tourism is marked by its locomotive nature, in that we're moving and you're trying to hit all the places, you're trying to see the things that you want to see. But that's what I find so energizing about it. And I especially feel that way. I mean, you're publishing in the New Yorker. She's taking for granted that people have the funds to travel. And so I think many of those people have sedentary, often desk jobs. And what's wrong with the travel being a way that you get out there and you get more physical activity, you get new experiences that break up the sort of daily grind of your life. And that's what in the end, towards the end of the piece, she says she says something that I think is supposed to be very negative, but which I think you and I, Ryan, will actually find. I mean, this could be the tagline of our show. She says, travel splits the expanse of time into the chunk that happens before the trip and the chunk that happens after it, obscuring from view the certainty of annihilation. I think the certainty of annihilation, that should be the new the scene taken. I mean, there is no question in my mind. This actually made me think a lot about, one of my personal heroes, Theodore Roosevelt. He was known to have just a tireless energy. And he also was known to have a very negative, sort of depressed bent of mind when he was sitting still. And I do think that it was constant motion, constant locomotion, like she says, and just frenetic travel, reading, new experiences, meeting new people, writing letters, reading new books, just a massive, that he was just always going. People would say that when he was in a meeting, his hand would be clenched because the energy he was trying to like keep in order to stay focused in the meeting. And I do think it was because he was always trying to obscure from view the certainty of annihilation. He had his first wife died on the same day as his mother. He said, the light has gone out of my life. And I do think whenever I'm kind of getting into that more down state, I do think that getting out there, exploring, moving, asking questions, talking to new people, this is your life should be divided into the before your travel and after your travel. And you should try to fight this hopelessness that the certainty of annihilation can have by getting out there. And if you're interested, putting your money into travel.
And, I think Teddy Roosevelt is a great person to talk about, because when I went to Panama, I didn't know that much about the Panama Canal. And I read the Epic Between the Seas book about the creation of the canal. I read 2 novels about the creation of the canal. I learned so much about Colombian history and French history and American history on that 2-week trip to Panama, and the reading that I did before and after and while I was there. And so I think she kind of doesn't allow for the way that travel can, I wouldn't have sat at home and just been like, you know what I need to learn about today? The Panama Canal. And then just spent like months researching that. It was inspired by my travels, and it led to me reading other things. And so I think she sort of doesn't allow for travel to be that kind of an expansive activity. And there's she also talks a bit about how you don't meet people when you're traveling or
Yes.
I've met so many people in my travels, people I've made friends and all over the world that I stay in touch with and that I see when they come to New York, or when I go to Europe or to Latin America. That to me is just like, well, why didn't you speak to why weren't you speaking to people? How did you not meet folks?
Right. That is a choice that you're making in how you travel. And actually, you've reminded me, one of the very first times I was ever able to get out of the country, I had an interview. I did this like 3-year rotational program, which I did primarily because the second year I could live in London, and that was my whole purpose. And when I was applying, it was if you got to a second round interview, in fact, you'd be flown to London to do the next interview. And so I was like, oh, I don't even really need to get this job. I just need to get to the second round interview to get that flight. And I did. And Rowan Atkinson was playing Fagin in Oliver on the West End.
So fun.
And so, I went and I did the interview, and I was really relaxed because I was like, hey, I already got the trip. I got the trip to London, so I'm happy. Don't need the job. I went to go see Oliver, and I was sitting in this real nosebleed seat. And I was like a very nervous traveler at that time. I didn't really have the bravery to talk to a lot of people. And at the intermission, there was a couple next to me. I'm there all alone. There's a couple next to me. They get up and leave, and they come back, and they have these ice creams. And they handed me an ice cream. And I said, oh, wow, why are you giving me ice cream? And this British gentleman said, oh, when you go to the theater in London, you must have ice cream at intermission. And I said, how did you know that I wasn't British? And he said, oh, when you came into the aisle, you said, excuse me. And I could hear your American accent. You're here alone and you're a young man. And I just figured you didn't know this was the tradition. And, what a small, seemingly insignificant gesture. I have thought about that so many times. I mean, this is going well over a decade, and I'm still thinking about that small interaction I had with that person. I try to take that approach to my interactions with strangers who I see uncomfortable traveling in a place. Now, how can you make the argument to me that was not growth, both for that person and for myself?
Yeah, and that's a great story. And I know that folks don't love it when we talk about the theater. My first job in New York, was working at TKTS. And I spoke to tourists from all over the world all day long. And I would like to think that I was able to help them guide them to see a show that they would respond to, and that their interaction with me, and they would ask me about living in New York and where I was from. And, is it true that all the apartments are crappy, and all the things that you would imagine they would talk to you about. And those were, largely just really positive experiences for me, and I hope for the folks who were inflicting their change upon me.
This is where I would sum it up, is that, obviously we don't agree with the thesis and many of the sub points here. When I saw this article start to gain traction online, before I had read it, but the title tells you exactly what it's going to be, I was willing to go in. I knew that I wasn't going to be convinced by this argument. We care enough about travel. We've been talking about it on mics for 4 years continuously. But I was open-minded about, is there actually an argument here for there being a negative effect? And I just have to say it doesn't convince me in any one of these points.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think look, she definitely started a conversation, and there's certainly things that you can avoid being the straw man that she is setting up. You can avoid being that kind of traveler, by doing the things that we talk about on the pod a lot, and our guests have talked about, So that's I think we've made a pretty good case for travel.
The case for travel. All right, Ryan. Well, with that, I guess, as you say, she gave us something to talk about. With that, I think it's time. It's gotten me ready to travel. I think it's time to take off. And wait, not to take off. I think it's time. With that, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Now, Ryan, this is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's called The Last Stop. That's the reason for it. It's a little tongue-in-cheek with the last stop on this train. That's the New York subway. And it's where it's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People segment, and that's because it's extremely democratic in nature. Because we welcome the community to come in. It's not just us talking at you. I mean, don't get me wrong. We can't hear you if you talk right now, but we come to share a piece of ourselves. We could share a story, plans, dreams, aspirations. We even could have had an argument about an article, but we decided to put that. We had so much to say, we put it in the takeoff zone. But importantly, it has to meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week, helping to obscure the view, the certainty of annihilation. So, Ryan, I have to ask you, as I ask you every week, have you brought something that will divide the expanse of time into the chunk before travel and after travel, thus helping me to avoid thoughts of death?
Yeah, so I have brought a last stop. So this week, Royal Caribbean, the cruise ship company, had released some photos of their new ship called Icon of the Seas, and went viral because of the sheer just size of this thing.
It's shocking.
5,600 passengers at 2,300 crew members. It's 5 times larger than the Titanic, and it's got 19 floors and 40 bars, restaurants, and bowling alleys. And I think that Agnes and I would agree that this is not our favorite way to travel. But it is certainly, we've talked about over tourism, and I can just imagine if they were still letting cruise ships land in Venice, the kind of damage this baby could do when it shows up. But I'll post the photo that folks can click on in the show notes. I mean, someone described it as, it looks like a really fancy dessert, which I think.
I mean, it does. It's true.
It is really something. So it's I don't know what else to say about it. I was just flabbergasted by I thought it was maybe AI generated when I first saw the photo, and then
yeah, that's funny. I mean, I just do we never learn? I mean, the icebergs are getting ready. It's shocking. The thing that terrifies me is just are we getting to the size where technology could fail? I actually know somebody who was on a cruise ship where the mechanics, the electronics that keep it balanced and keep the deck straight failed, and the entire boat tipped significantly. And she's not the youngest woman, and many older passengers tipped along with the boat. And I got to tell you, I really am fearful when we push limits like this. It's not a boat I'm planning on getting on.
You remember playing SimCity 2000 when you were a kid? And
Of course. Of course. When I'm newly born in 2000.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. I love that you got it wrong. I love that you got it wrong.
Does this remind you of one of those things that you built that held like 200,000 people in SimCity? It was like a little city in itself. It's just it seems like it's from the future and not necessarily in a good way.
That's great.
Yeah. So did you bring a last stop for us this week?
I did. Yeah. Ryan, have you seen Asteroid City?
I loved it.
Yes. Okay. So Asteroid City is the latest film from Wes Anderson. Ryan and I have seen a couple Wes Anderson movies together, and we're both big fans of Wes Anderson. Love his aesthetic. Think he tells really original stories, creates vibrant and very funny characters. And there was just something about the desolation of the environment in Asteroid City that I was compelled to go online and try to find out where it was shot. And I came across an awesome, really cool article from Travel and Leisure that is filming location of Wes Anderson movies that cinephiles can visit in real life. And so if you're a fan of Wes Anderson like Ryan and I, you can find out where the Grand Budapest Hotel is, which is in a small historic town in Germany. You can browse some of the New York destinations that were featured in my personal favorite, the Royal Tenenbaums. And I have to say there was one shocking revelation in this for me, Ryan, which is Moonrise Kingdom, which I think we saw together.
Yes, we did.
You may remember that much of that takes place at like a campsite, and it's sort of like a Boy Scout situation. And as it turns out, the scouting was inspired by a Rhode Island scout camp that I went to as a kid. Camp Yagoog, Yawgoog. I swear to God, that's right here in this article.
That doesn't surprise me.
I grew up going, first, my troop, we used to go to Camp Sequoias, which is in upstate Connecticut. And then when that got a little too crowded and we just didn't like it as much, we wanted something a little lower key. We switched to Camp Yagoog in Rhode Island. And amazingly, this was one of the inspirations from the Moonrise Kingdom. It all takes place in sort of a fictional New England town. And this is it. I went there. I was the boy in Moonrise Kingdom.
You are a Wes Anderson character. I've always thought so.
That rarely has someone said something so kind.
We'll link in the show notes to the episode we did with the accidentally Wes Anderson creator. Yes. One of my favorite interviews. And that is super fun. I got to go check out the Tenenbaum house in Brooklyn.
For sure. And the other thing that's just relevant to us, because we both liked Asteroid City, was that they did shoot in Arizona, but a lot of the shooting took place in Spain, which I thought was very interesting because it has such a Western feel.
I read all sorts of fun things, like they didn't have a call sheet and they made all those actors just sit around all day and everybody ate together in like a big communal table at the end of the night. And
it sounds amazing.
Brian called it Brian from Breaking. Oh gosh, his last name's escaping me. From Breaking Bad.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, Bryan Cranston said it was like theater camp, and he loved filming it.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. I was very surprised by the joke where he stepped into the film in color and said, "Oh, am I not supposed to be here?" That seemed very odd to me. That didn't seem like something that would have made it into the movie.
It's a really fun film. Folks should check it out.
All right, Ryan. Well, with that,
I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a pro-travel podcast.
Travel splits the expanse of time into the chunk that happens before the trip and the chunk that happens after it, obscuring from view the certainty of annihilation.
Is this seat taken?
Ryan, you got to get to the mic repair shop.
I will.